Welcome back to our 20th anniversary celebration. Joining us now, a journalist who's been on the scene for just about every one of the stories we've shown you tonight. From New York, Peter Jennings, the anchor and senior editor of ABC's World News Tonight. Long a supporter of international coverage, has CNN helped others in that regard, do you think, Peter, for more of a focus in other places?
Well, I have to tell you, first of all, congratulations from a member of the enemy forces.
Thank you.
I was early convinced that you'd make an enormous difference. I don't think we appreciated how much a difference CNN would make. I'm sitting here covering pages with notes and being reminded of things and events and trends and impact that you and the general globalization of the media have had. Tom Mintier, I think, said it well: the power of a single image will never be forgotten. I'm struck by how many images of Tiananmen Square I'd forgotten until I saw them again, but never the image of that guy standing in front of the tank, whether it was a still picture or a television picture, whether it was yours or whether it was ours. And watching Jimmy Carter tonight, because I was in Iran all during the revolution, I remember how tough the globalization of the media, led by CNN, has made diplomacy in the world today. Because I used to get these calls in the middle of the night in downtown Tehran saying Jimmy Carter said X, and I'd rush up to the foreign minister's apartment in Tehran. He'd already have seen it on television in some devious way, and so the idea of having calm and contemplation in foreign policy went out the window with all of this globalization.
And Peter, unlike naysayers, is it true that, I know you were based in London, when you came to New York and saw CNN for the first time, you told executives at ABC that it would work?
I did indeed. I'd come on vacation to Florida, and I saw you on the air for the first time, and there were indeed a lot of naysayers, as you recall, a lot of people who just sort of gave you the back of the hand. And it may have had to do with the fact that I lived overseas. It was clear to me that you were going to make a difference. On the other hand, listening to Jimmy Carter tonight talk about the impact overseas, I think people at home should understand that having CNN in many parts of the world is a privilege, and very often the privilege of the elite. I've been in an awful lot of countries where the only place you could see CNN was in the foreign ministry or the hotels. And while that's changing, it has, in some ways, enabled, as I said, this elite to have this American, very largely American view of the world, but not everybody.
How about the whole changing news business? What has been the effect of this on you?
Well, you know, anytime Mike Chenoy's contract is up, we'd like to have him. and the reason for that is very simple. I think it doesn't matter where you plug in. If you don't have substance, if you don't have good reporters, if you only train a camera on something, and I don't mean to imply that this is what you do, if you only train a camera on something without having the kind of context that a guy like Mike Chenoy gives you, then I don't think coverage of this continuous nature is always the most valuable thing in the world. But goodness knows, you can go anywhere in the world, from Bombay in the morning to Beirut in the afternoon, and plug in and show us what is happening. I think that makes it very difficult for your reporters. I think technology's made it very difficult for reporters in general, because it gives us less time to go and report the story. It gives us less time to gather the background that is important to contextual reporting. And so I think it's made us in the commercial networks, you know, ABC, NBC, CBS, it's made us look to what we think are our strengths, which is the value-added business of giving you, at this one and only time of the day, or two only times of the day in our case, that we get some added value of context.
What's next? What about tomorrow? And, you know, I mean it in the sense of, say, the next 10 years. What changes are coming?
Well, you know, it's interesting. Magic Johnson reminds me a little bit. You know, he says that he went public in part because he wanted to educate people in the world. I take him at his word. But I think he also went public because those of us in the press, and those of you who do it all the time, were in some respects hounding him, almost forcing him to come out. And I think one of the dangers of having all this media all the time is that we do hound people in a way that we didn't do 20 or 30 years ago. So I think there's going to be more media all the time. I think the internet is going to transform our children's lives if it doesn't transform ours. And the hardest thing of all will be for you at CNN and us at ABC and people who have access to the internet to make sense of it all for ourselves and for everybody else.
And what might it do to privacy and personal lives?
Well, I think that's a little what I'm alluding to in the case of Magic Johnson. The truth of the matter is that the first really great reporting, the great responsible reporting about AIDS in America, was done on public broadcasting, on PBS, long before those of us in commercial television got as serious about it as we needed to be in the 80s. I think we finally got there. But But I think there's always the danger that when you train a camera, yours or ours for that matter, on something all the time, when Elian becomes such a centerpiece of our lives as it was again today, then I think we have to be very careful. It sounds a little pompous, I realize. We have to be very careful that we don't go over these lines.
We have less than a minute. You're so big, Disney. We're so big, Time Warner. Worry about that at all? Can it be too big?
Yeah, of course. Well, I think all of us should worry that the more media there is in the fewer hands, that raises the possibility, I emphasize the word possibility, the potential, that fewer people will have access, fewer people with as many opinions will have access to the media. I have to say very quickly that in the case of Disney, I have not seen a shred of evidence in it in the time that they have owned ABC News. I'm relieved by that. I'm exhilarated by that. But it's always going to be an issue as long as more media is in fewer hands. Yes, I think as citizens we should worry.
Great talking with you. Thanks so much.
Nice to see you. Congratulations to all of you. You did a great job.
Thanks for celebrating with us. Peter Jennings, the anchor and senior editor of ABC's World News Tonight. 1989 was a year when the fight for freedom was front-page news. Some 6 months after the student protests in Beijing, in another capital halfway around the world, the people once again took to the streets.
When I was a child, I watched the Berlin Wall going up. To be there on the day that it started coming down was an unbelievable experience.
It was amazing, the whole thing. Watching this, you didn't want to go to sleep. You didn't want to miss anything.
It's a once-in-a-lifetime story. The politicians were going to officially declare the border open between the two Germanys. The people didn't wait for that at all. They began walking past the politicians. They began climbing over the walls, hugging each other.
After almost 3 decades of separation, Germans of East and West embraced in a common victory. Some came because they wanted to test whether it was true. Others, embittered by years of repression, came vowing they would never go back.
It was really history. This was actually happening right in front of you, and you saw these waves of people and reunions and hugs. Unbelievable drama.
It's great. I just can't believe it.
When they finally saw that the governments could no longer hold them back, there was nothing to restrain them.
I saw it on TV, and I think it's not possible. I must go to Berlin and look at it.
Wonderful. That's wonderful.
The symbol of the Cold War, the Berlin Wall, was under attack Friday night. Berliners from east and west wielded hammers, sticks, whatever they could lay their hands on to chip away at years of separation.
This was the beginning of the end of communism in Europe. The first chips that were, coming out of that wall as people were pulverizing it. I have a piece of the Berlin Wall. It's about this big, and I'll cherish it forever.
We were told that part of the wall was being torn down. There were about 3,000 people on the West German side. And all of a sudden, out of the dark of the East German side, this crane just showed up and brought down its claw. And finally, this slab of wall just sort of cracked open. And it brought a tremendous cheer, like you've never heard at any sporting event. That was just, it gave you tingles.
The tide is clearly turning in favor of those who want significant political change here.
I wasn't in Berlin long because I was then sent to Prague to see what was happening there in what was then Czechoslovakia. There was a demonstration on November 17th, 1989. They marched down the streets, they marched to a cemetery, they marched all over the place, and the police blocked them. And there was really a showdown.
It was on November 17th that Czechoslovakia's communist leaders decided the growing protest movement could somehow be crushed by the force of clubs and the fear of arrest.
Let's take off very quick.
I got beaten up a lot back then. The times when the police were coming at us, even at the press, and beating us up, the anger on these troops' faces, just very scary anger. And you'd turn around and you'd look at the protesters, and they had a lot of determination on their face. They were going forward no matter what.
1 week later, I came back, and I'm in Wenceslas Square with 1 million people.
At the biggest rally in the history of Czechoslovakia, 500,000 people braved frigid weather to send a message to the government.
And then the new eventual president of the Czech Republic, Václav Havel, is addressing the people.
Every night, we'd go out to the square, and it would be absolutely dead quiet, deserted. And then the people would come, you know, and you'd hear the keys ringing.
10,000 people are jingling their keys, and it made a horrific sound. These were people that were waiting for the oppression to be lifted. And again, it was almost like they were walking out of a cave into the sunshine.
Czechoslovakia and Germany then encouraged Romania. But when we arrive at the border crossing, they've already cut the hammer and sickle out of the heart of the Romanian flag.
The first time they opened their mouths freely was to cry "Down with Ceausescu" in last week's demonstrations.
It was a scene over and over again, wherever we went, 1989. People standing by the road, flashing a V at us. And they knew who CNN was. They had been using CNN International via satellite in order to get their news.
Despite the provisional government's call for a ceasefire, war played its Christmas drum in the center of Bucharest.
Romania was the bloodiest of the East European revolutions. There were a lot of people that were killed. There was still Securitate, which was special police on the street. When you had to feed a tape at the TV station, you had to run through a sniper's alley. They executed Ceausescu on Christmas Day.
The dictator is dead, but he's left a mark on everyday life here that will take much more than a one-week revolution to rub out.
We will be happy if we have liberty and we have what to eat, what to sleep, to have warm water. Or for the children, you know.
I remember they would come up to you and tug at your sleeve and try to tell you their story, even if they didn't speak any English and you spoke no Romanian.
These people had been denied Christmas by their leader. They'd been told they couldn't have one. They'd been waiting all those years for a Christmas tree.
And not far away, people gathering. Normal for Christmas anywhere else, but forbidden here for 4 decades. From now on, Christmas time here will be more than a joyful religious celebration. It will be a time when a nation remembers its heroes.
For all of us here at CNN, thanks so much for watching. Our 20th anniversary celebration continues tomorrow night with Ken Starr, Anita Hill, Colin Powell, Barbara Walters, plus legal adversaries together, Johnny Cochran and Chris Darden, not to mention the Gulf War and a presidency under fire, and many more incredible moments from the 1990s.
Allied air forces began an attack on military targets in Iraq and Kuwait.
This clearly was a huge story, the biggest story we'd ever covered.
This is Orenthal James Simpson.
A whole city was built across the street from the courthouse that we called Camp OJ.
Wow. Amazement is not strong enough to describe the feeling of seeing this building which had imploded.